You're listening to an Airwave Media Podcast.
Christopher Media, let's make some noise.
Does this seem familiar to anybody?
It's not Pulp Fiction. It's not Reservoir Dogs. It's not Natural Born Killers.
You got that?
It's Plump Fiction. A film of tender romance.
How do I look?
Nice.
Penetrating drama. And hard-hitting action. Plump Fiction. It's a parody.
She's got a tattoo.
It's actually a little map, see? It points away to the nearest burger world.
It's a comedy.
I hear you used to strip.
It's a movie.
It's all messed up. It doesn't make any sense.
I know. I love it.
You do?
Who cares what comes when? That's so mainstream. As long as it's bloody and violent. Maxwell, we're gonna shoot this.
See Plump Fiction.
Welcome to the Projection Booth. I'm your host, Mike White. Joining me once again is Mr. Mike Sullivan.
Hey, so you really didn't like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, did you, huh?
Also back in the booth is Mr. Chris Gore.
Thanks for having me on, Mike.
This week we are discussing the parody film Plump Fiction. The film is based loosely on Quentin Tarantino and Roger Avary's Pulp Fiction from 1994. It stars Paul Dinello and Tommy Davidson as a salt and pepper hitman team. Dinello has been asked by his boss to take out his boss's wife, Mimi Hungry, played by Julie Brown, to show her a good time. Their adventure brings them in contact with a handful of other Tarantinos as well as other independent movies of the day. I'm not sure if there's much to spoil about Plump Fiction, but we will do our best to do so. So, Mike, I'm very curious, when was the first time you saw Plump Fiction, and what did you think?
I saw this actually when it was released, and I saw it in theaters. I saw it in Ontario, California, and it was playing in an outlet mall. And oddly enough, there was a short that came with it. It was Swing Blade. And it was like, remember like they were doing that mashup back then where there was like movie A is movie B, and it was like Swingers and Sling Blade. And that was a short before it. It was just me in the audience and like two 13-year-old kids. And about like 20 minutes into it, like the two like 13-year-olds just get up and they leave. And instead of like just leaving the normal way, they decide to leave like during like the exit, like right underneath the screen. So, like, when they opened the door, you couldn't see the movie at all. Like, it was just like, you know, they just filled the theater with light, and it was probably the best part of the movie when these kids left.
How about you, Chris?
You know what's weird is I thought I saw this movie when it first came out. And by that I mean like my memory that this movie was well publicized. I'm a fan of spoof comedies, but frankly, I watched this mere moments before the podcast began because I found it free on YouTube. And that is the first time I have seen the movie, is me sitting going, oh, wait, we're about to record a podcast. I should watch this movie. I'm watching it going, oh, I don't remember ever seeing this. I do remember vividly the trailer, and I remember the poster for this film because, of course, it, you know, parodied the poster of the original Pulp Fiction. But I had never seen this film until moments before this podcast started recording. I finished watching it, and so my memories are very vivid and fresh.
I remember the poster or the video box for this really well with, I almost said downtown Julie Brown. Oh my God, what a huge mistake. With right. Julie Brown on the cover there. It was right around the time, I want to say, of like Silence of the Hams. It seems like maybe like those two movies kind of went together as far as sitting on the video shelf at the same time.
Yeah, oh yeah.
I don't remember when I actually sat down to watch this. And I actually sat down for sure to watch it. Just a couple months ago, I was doing a audio commentary for a podcast on Pulp Fiction because I just get tired of people talking shit about stuff. And it's just like, oh, I think I might be able to add to this conversation and actually bring some new light to it. I don't know why. So I'm just like, oh, well, I don't think I've ever seen Plump Fiction. So I just decided to do it. And sometimes I regret the decisions that I make. This is an interesting time capsule of what independent movies were like in 1996. And there are a couple things in here where I was just like, okay, I think I'm getting the reference here. I'm not 100%, but the comedy is so broad that you're pretty sure to get stuff. Like, I don't remember, or I don't know how many people remember the piano right off the bat, but the piano plays a pretty major part in this. I mostly just remember naked Harvey Keitel, but then I'm thinking maybe Bad Lieutenant as well.
Because there's a joke in that later with Nell where she's like, Liam Neeson's penis, which I thought he was in the piano showing his penis. Like, was there a movie where Liam Neeson showed his penis in the 90s that it qualified as a joke?
He was in Nell, but I don't remember if there was like a skinny dipping scene in that movie.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I actually laughed out loud when they pulled off the Gimp's mask and it was Nell underneath there. We start with Bunny and Bumpkin, and Bumpkin is played by Dan Castellaneta. I always fuck up his name. Basically, he's Homer Simpson.
Yeah, it's close enough.
Bunny's being played by Sandra Bernhard. We very clearly spell out a lot of things that are going to happen in this movie, and this is basically the diner scene, but there's a whole lot of other stuff going on in here. And yeah, we've got Bumpkin. I kept thinking that they were just going to call him Bump or something other than Bumpkin.
I don't know why they did that. It feels like so cracked magazine that like Oliver Stone is Gulliver Stone, and then like why didn't they just go with the actual names?
If you don't do that, you don't get funny things like Jimmy Nova.
Okay.
Right.
Or Candy Cane. But yeah, like I said at the beginning, this is like a whole mashup of all of these Tarantino movies plus all of these independent films. And they do an interesting thing by setting a lot of the independent film stuff here at this opening diner that they're doing. And it's like a themed diner. So then it actually eliminates the need for Jack Rabbit Slims later on, and they just come back to this same diner, which also saves you a lot of cost when it comes to securing locations.
This film, first of all, almost every joke is a groaner, right? I mean, every joke you're just groaning over, from the name choices to, saying Gulliver Stone instead of Oliver Stone, to just the clearly super low budget nature of it. There's some decent cast in there. I love seeing Paul Provenza as the director. It was cool to see him in that bit part. My God, it's not just, a parody of sort of the indie films at the time. It's also, Forrest Gump is not an independent film, but it was out. It's sort of that, whatever is sort of in the air, in the zeitgeist, it sort of worms its way into this movie. But oh my God, is it so hard to find laughs? I'll just say that this movie has not aged well. And it just reminded me, oh my God, I can't wait to watch Pulp Fiction again, just to get the bad taste out of my mouth.
Some of my favorite dated moments from that was, there's a reference to like when, and I forgot about this completely, when that guy just started shooting at the White House, the Bill Clinton. Do you remember this? There's a scene There's a scene like in the Gimp scene where the French guy, I don't know why he's French, where he's going, do you think you could wave your gun around here as if you're outside the White House? And I'm like, that's a reference to something. And then I remembered, oh yeah, there was a string of guys during Clinton's presidency that would just like walk up next to the White House and just fire at the White House. And I totally forgot about that. And then there's another one where the other tag team is called the Brothers McMullen. And I'm like, oh, yeah, was it Ed Burns? That Ed Burns movie,
yeah.
The Brothers McMullen? Yeah.
I remember that one getting a lot of play because he used to work for Entertainment Tonight as like an intern or something. So they like just latched onto that. Like, hey, we have an independent filmmaker that used to work for us. And they had like a huge thing about the Brothers McMullen on Entertainment Tonight. It's like, really? Okay. Tommy Davidson, who people may remember as Cream Corn from Black Dynamite. He was really good in Living Color, but he's not like a household name. It's kind of weird. He kind of slips in and out of that Sammy Davis Jr. impersonation. Like, I thought he was going to do that the entire time, and thank God he didn't.
You could see the choices of the cast just, I don't know, maybe this will be funny. They're kind of trying things out. And just it landing with a thud. I mean, the one thing you get from the ending of the film, which shows a lot of, I'm saying beyond the ending of the film. I mean, the running time is like 77 minutes, which any movie with a running time under 80 minutes, I'll watch it. I'll sit through it. Why not? But you see that they clearly had way more fun in the outtakes. They're just good. They were having so much fun, and I would have rather seen a movie about all these people sitting around goofing on each other, rather than the actual movie that they ended up making.
There were times where I was wondering if the outtakes were actually staged.
One of the outtakes in particular, when they're going down the hallway and they kind of are bumping into each other, that seems completely staged. Like, look at all the fun we're having. But boy, hasn't aged well. I think a spoof parody film is really hard to make in terms of just, I'm sure we'll talk about it later. I don't want to derail the conversation, which is generally my specialty on a podcast. But, I made a parody film myself, and, in similar vein that I think was maybe, I hate to say seeing this, and I'm not saying my film is any better than this or worse, but I tried to be a little bit more ambitious by including animation and song numbers and just a little bit more of an ambitious production than this. It's hard to do. I mean, I would say that the parody films, Mel Brooks are the ones that have stood the test of time. Everything from High Anxiety, spoofing, the beloved films of Alfred Hitchcock, and Silent Movie, and Blazing Saddles. Oh my God, you could not make Blazing Saddles today. There is no way. But those movies were about something other than the parody of a genre or whatnot. That was sort of the parody was the setting, but there was an actual movie. Here, with Plump Fiction, the parody is all there is. It's not a movie about anything else other than we're going to spoof some scenes from movies you probably remember. But there's no other layers to it, whereas Mel Brooks was so good about not only getting you to care about the characters and completely forget the setting of the film, but also having actually something to say about society, politics, romantic relationships. I mean, and plus the performances. So it's like, I feel like Mel Brooks is like the sort of the best of it, and this is definitely near the bottom.
Also, I got to say, like, Mel Brooks avoided, and I may be wrong about this, but I feel like he avoided topical gags. Like, he wasn't doing bits about Agnew. A lot of, like, parody films, like, from, like, Plump Fiction, even before Plump Fiction, I think Mafia had topical gags. Like, I think there was a Bill Quentin, like, I did not have sexual relations with that woman joke in it. And the thing is, like, and you see it, like, even in the Friedberg and Seltzer movies where there's, like, Sanjaya jokes. My question is, why is there topical humor in a movie? Why? It's like if I went out and Fifi, like, tattooed on my forehead, it's like it's just something that's already sort of like old and not funny, and now it has a permanent place somewhere. I don't, it's just why do something as disposable as topical gags in a movie?
It's lazy. Let's just say that. I think it speaks more to television skits. This is why I think the film was so painful to watch. Is that this is done so much better on television when you see some of those SNL Saturday Night Live skits do become classic, but they're not always about just the let's spoof a thing. I think I just think that's the low hanging fruit of comedy. I don't know. But again, here I am speaking as someone who's made a film that's in a similar vein, which I'm sure you guys are going to skewer me. So I'll just wait for that.
I'm going to be nice. I'm not skewering anybody. I'm going to be nice.
Skewer me all you want. I can take it.
I do actually really appreciate the Mickey and Mallory Knox ripoffs. A little bit goes a long way, but the Pamela Adlon doing the Juliette Lewis impersonation, she's fucking spot on, man. She is amazing. Sounds just like Juliette Lewis, especially in that role.
You just caught me and Nikki here in the middle of some real important business. Ain't that right, baby?
That's right, Daisy. Real important business.
So I guess you'll just have to come back some other time. I'm telling you. Now pick up your fucking bug cans and get out!
That voice, her voice, was incredible. You're right. It was just dead on to like the sort of squeaky, throaty nature of it. I mean, she was probably the best in the whole cast next to Julie Brown.
What I liked about Matthew Glave, who always plays like dicks in comedies. I think he's like in more serious stuff now. But what he did with that is he played it a pretty good Woody Harrelson, but towards the end it just basically turns into Don Knotts, which I kind of like that.
Yeah, and I actually liked when they break the fourth wall and grab the camera and they're just like, no, none of that like trippy shit anymore. You know, this is a straight story, and talk about the Gulliver's Own kind of stuff. But I was like, okay, that's kind of nice, you know. Some of the other moments of fourth wall breaking, I was like, well, okay. Yeah, I'm not really sure I forgive this, but yeah, you're right. Julie Brown is the other one who does such a great job because she seems to be very into that character. She doesn't seem to be winking at the camera all the time. She's like, this is my character and I'm going to play the shit out of this character.
She looks good as a brunette too. I just got to say that. I know it's like a very obvious wig, but it suits her being a brunette.
I think one of the most painful scenes is that diner scene where it's the menus based on independent films, you know. And I do think that they loosely used. I mean, Natural Born Killers is not an independent film. I mean, that was distributed by Warner Brothers, so I think that they're very loose in their interpretation of exactly what they're qualifying as an independent film. But that diner where Priscilla, Queen of the Dessert, is walking around, the drag queen, and just sort of introducing the menu.
Today's specials are listed on the back.
Oh, what's a crying game appetizer?
Well, we tell you it's an absolutely fabulous assortment of raw fish. Then we bring you a hot dog instead.
Oh, and the waterworld platter?
That's just a cheese sandwich, but it costs $270.
You go ahead, Jimmy. I just can't decide.
All right. I'll just have the Woody Allen with an extra pickle, thank you.
Sorry, sir. That's our children's menu. You have to be underage to get the Woody.
Oh.
I feel like it's one of those things where the writers in the room writing this were high or drunk, thought it was hysterical. For them, it was. And I think the only way this movie should have a rating that says you must be high, or these are recommended 6 beers, or, you know, whatever your mind-altering preferred substance is. Because I think the only way this comes off as being funny is if you're stoned and it's late at night.
Yeah, you're totally right about the looseness of the term. I mean, that they have a Waterworld sandwich on the menu, it's like, yeah, that's not really independent cafe fare, I would think, but looking for the cheap gag.
Just it's sort of, that's one for movie geeks, you know, like I understood that reference. But I do think that a lot of the stuff falls flat because it hasn't aged well. And also, I can't imagine this was ever funny at the time, you know, which, wow, I really wish I had seen this. It might have dissuaded me from actually making a parody movie.
I think Natural Born Killers was included because Tarantino wrote the script or wrote one of the drafts of the script. That's what I took away from that.
Yeah, and that's why they have the Reservoir Nuns in there as well, so that they can kind of tie all the Tarantino verse together, if you will. I know that's kind of a new term that no one's ever used before, so I'm coining that term right here on the show. It took me a minute to get the Reality Bites thing when they're dancing to My Sharona. I was just like, is that a Hal Hartley? No, it's not Hal Hartley. I was thinking of something else, and then finally I had to Google Dancing to My Sharona in an independent film and came up with Reality Bites. I thought I had burned that entire film out of my memory.
I didn't even get that as a reference, to tell you the truth. It didn't register as anything. That bit,
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to just go through this plot piece by piece because it's basically retelling Pulp Fiction. The big joke is that this is based on the screenplay that Sandra Bernhard has written, and she gives it to the Forrest Gump character, and he runs around with it, and he keeps getting into accidents, and so the pages get all mixed up, so they're making fun of the nonlinear storytelling. But it pretty much follows the exact same nonlinear storytelling that Pulp Fiction did. So what are you going to do? But there are some interesting bits to it, but not necessarily. Yeah, overall, I don't necessarily think that this works as a whole.
It's very inconsistent. Well, I guess that maybe the one consistent thing is it's consistently not funny for the entire thing. But with just little moments that I think are just, really meant to satisfy movie geeks that pay attention to this stuff. I mean, it does sort of appeal to the, very base level of humor, but I think that you've really got to know these movies to actually get it.
Did you notice how many Sound of Music references there were in this movie?
Yeah, it was weird. And I feel like that was just bizarre. Like, why? Was someone a fan of Sound of Music? Whatever.
I didn't notice that, but I noticed all the zany reprisals of Hava Nagila.
There were a lot of those. I never knew that Dick Dale did a version of Hava Nagila until I sat through the credits. I was like, really? That was Dick Dale?
It was really... I didn't know that. I thought that was like just a riff. I didn't know it was actually Dick Dale. Oh, wow.
They definitely are trying to get their money's worth out of Hava Nagila. And then, there's a moment when Jules starts quoting doe a deer, female deer, and he does like the first 3 verses, and it's like, really? And then there's a couple other things about people dressed as Nazis or something, and they're doing a revival of the Sound of Music, and all the nuns. I think the nuns also get mentioned with that.
Yeah. There are 2 things I liked about this movie. I want to just point out Robert Costanzo. I really liked him in his role, and I think he's really good in it. And I think the reason why he's good in it is because he's not forced to do an impression. He's just playing a Robert Costanzo character. It's kind of awkwardly done, but I think even at this point, that intro to Reservoir Dogs, or the slow walk thing from Reservoir Dogs, had been done to death, and they start out kind of like a straightforward parody of that, which is Nuns, which just seems lazy. But then it just jumps into the Monkees theme. It just recreates the intro to the Monkees. And I'm like, it's surprising, because you think they're just going to go through the whole thing with them walking, but then they just do like the Monkees intro. And it's kind of like Family Guy humor, and it's awkwardly edited. But I don't know, it was a bright spot for me. I like that.
That Monkees parody of the title sequence for the Monkees it was definitely a highlight, but also just sort of, again, inconsistent, because
right,
Mike, you mentioned earlier that all the Sound of Music references. It's like, I kind of feel like if you're going to do a parody, it should be as much true to that genre. So independent films and of a certain era. And I just think that, like, if you're going to do that, I think those rules apply. And throwing out a reference that, I don't know, like a 30-year-old reference to the Monkey Show. I mean, nearly 30 years old from the time that movie was made originally, just seems off. Even though I got that reference and I thought it was funny. It just seemed to, the rules, they were playing fast and loose with the rules that they were, I would assume that they were setting up to do sort of a Tarantino-verse parody.
The one thing that maybe you guys can help me out with is, I didn't understand why he had to keep Mimi away from eating Mexican food. I've watched this twice now, and I still can't figure out why he needs to stop her from doing that.
Is that like a blind date reference? Don't get her drunk? I don't know. Like, I never really understood it either.
Yeah, no, look, this is fresh in my mind because I just watched it before we started recording. Watched the entire thing, and yeah, you're right. There is no, like, why. There's no rhyme or reason for not to. I mean, it's to give him something to do. I mean, I'm trying to remember if the husband, said don't have her eat Mexican food. I don't know. It just doesn't. Maybe that was something that was cut.
Because there's also that weird moment where she does eat a taco, then all of a sudden her hair changes. And I was like, okay.
It gets bigger.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I thought maybe she would become like a sex maniac or just completely unhinged or whatever. But yeah, like I said before, the other real high point for me is the Nell parody. And I thought that they really captured that well. And I really appreciated, too, that Mimi can speak Nell because of her alcoholic mother that lived in Georgia. That was very nice.
Nell, God Dale, God aim, but Nell no like Dale, Dale eat doer, no let Nell win. Taina win. Me make sure little chick pay free ta in a win. Bala, don't let Neil. Bala don't can. How Bala don't let Neil. Me ma will out cow how from the south. Me own one in my fam to ten her. Neil, breathe. Neil. Then untie me and my frail hand and be like can help now.
Yeah, that bit worked actually. And then when it went to subtitles, I love that. I just love a film where it's like there'll be a subtitled sequence. Always enjoyed that.
I didn't get that one scene with like Kevin Meaney and Colleen Camp. And I know what it's making fun of. It's making fun of that scene. What was it? Eric Stoltz, the drug dealer in Pulp Fiction. That's what's okay. I don't understand. What is it? A sitcom, that scene, or is it like a Mike Douglas show type thing? Like did they just add the laugh track because the scene wasn't working? Like I don't understand what they were doing with that.
What I think they were trying to do was the scene from Natural Born Killers where it was Mallory and her family. Exactly.
Yeah.
But it didn't come through, obviously.
Right, yeah.
I do have to say it was very nice seeing Colleen Camp in this movie. I just watched the night before A House with a Clock on Its Walls, and I always love seeing her show up in anything, and especially young Colleen Camp is always very nice.
Yeah, Smokey and the Bandit 3. That's shocking she's on that. Smokey and the Bandit 3.
And I was also very happy to see Judy Tenuta, just as a very, very small role, but I miss seeing Judy Tenuta. I used to see her all the time on stuff, her and Emo Phillips, and it's like some of my favorite comedians I don't see anymore.
Yeah. I just want to say something about Paul Dinello. He's not that good in this, because he's more of a writer. He worked on Stranger with Candy. He was Joffrey Jellinek on Stranger with Candy, and he was good on that because he's good at playing like broken men that are just trying to show that they're okay. But he's a better writer. He wrote, I think he was a head writer on the Colbert Report, and I think this was post because he did a sketch show with Amy Sedaris and Stephen Colbert on Comedy Central, Exit 57, and I think this was right off the heels of that. And I guess he didn't know what he wanted to do at this point, so that's why he's in it. But he's a much better writer than a performer. That's. I just want to say my piece about Paul Dinello.
He kind of reminded me of a younger, at this time anyway, 1996, a younger Bob Odenkirk. Like there was something about his voice, I think.
Yeah. The way he says "God damn it" too. It's like very Bob Odenkirk. I don't know if he says it in the movie, but yeah.
He seems like an older person trapped in a younger person's body.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Sure, yeah.
Like 18 again.
I did like Jimmy J.J. Dynamite Walker coming in to get his wallet. I mean, it's a dumb joke. I think he's completely misused. But just to see him pop in and leave was like, oh, wow, he got his day rate to come in and say one or two lines. That was it.
Yeah, that actually was nice. Yeah, the cheap motherfucker, that wallet. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was so nice that it wasn't a dynamite joke. I was like, oh, please don't say dynamite. Please don't say dynamite. And Tim Kazurinsky as Priscilla, the Queen of the Desserts. I mean, I always appreciated Tim Kazurinsky from his very brief time on SNL, and then he would show up, he was like in some of the Police Academy movies?
2, 3, and 4. Just,
okay.
Yeah.
I would love the skit with him where he learns, I can't remember, I think it was him, and where they found out that President Kennedy was shot.
Yeah, there was like a bunch of people they just found out in the 80s that Kennedy was shot. I actually remember that sketch, yeah.
All right, we're going to take a break and play an interview with the writer-director Bob Koer, and we'll be back with that right after these brief messages.
Hey, do you like movies? Of course you do. You're listening to Mike White's phenomenal podcast, The Projection Booth. I'm here, however, to tell you about another movie-loving podcast, The Shameless Picture Show. My name is Michael Byers, and the show was created by myself and my good buddy in filmmaking, Nick Richards, in 2016 as a way for him and I to stay connected and to keep movies in our lives. Premise is simple. Each of us composed a list of shame filled with movies we've either missed, had no interest in, or just feel the other one should have seen. We've covered a wide range of films, from Heathers, The Godfather, The Exorcist, You're the Hunter from the Future, Phantom Tollbooth, a slew of amazing Vinegar Syndrome titles, and some that are not so good, plus our massive Rocky episode that features a new interview with Lloyd Kaufman himself, talking about his friendship with John G. Avildsen. And I personally can't wait for you to hear us and join the fight to keep film culture alive. You can find our show on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher Radio, and of course, SoundCloud.
I am thrilled to introduce Ovid.tv, the new streaming service for art house films, documentaries, and international cinema. Described by the New York Times as a haven for indie gems, Ovid.tv features films such as Claire Denis' Trouble Every Day, Deborah Granick's Stray Dog, and Raul Ruiz's Time Regained. As a special introductory offer for Projection Booth listeners, you can save 50% off the first 3 months of your subscription. Just head on over to Ovid.tv. That's ovid.tv. Sign up with the coupon code PODCAST, and you'll get Ovid.tv for just $3.50 per month for 3 months. The offer expires August 31st, so act now. You'll have access to hundreds of films not available on any other platform, which you can start streaming on all of your favorite devices, such as Apple TV and my personal favorite, the Roku. Once again, go over to Ovid.tv, ovid.tv, sign up with the coupon code PODCAST, and you'll get Ovid.tv for just $3.50 per month for 3 months. Act now.
You know, the girl from that.
Yes, I know
show
exactly.
On that.
I know exactly who you're talking about.
She has the hair.
The hair was, it was different, and she has the lips. She has the lips with the. Okay, yeah. Wait. She was just okay. You've seen her in a million movies. You know,
but the one that
we're talking about the exact same person. We don't always suck as bad as this, but listen to me, Chris Gore, and Anthony Ray Bench on the Film Threat Podcast.
You got questions. Sometimes we have the answers.
I'm Chris Cooling from Forgotten TV, and you're listening to The Projection Booth, the ultimate movie podcast.
Well, I'm very curious how you decided to get into show business, and was acting your first choice, or what was?
Yeah, so I graduated college with a degree in dramatic literature and acting. And so I was going to be a writer after. And I went to Circle in the Square Professional Theater School, which is the place you get into if you can't get into Juilliard. They're both really good schools. And so I did 1 year there, and just because I was putting myself through college and through acting school, when they asked me back, I couldn't afford it. So I was chosen, they whittle it down, and they chose me. And back then I was like, I'm never going to do TV. I'm never going to do a film unless it's a really good film. And I'm only going to do stage. And that, once the financial reality of that delusion cleared, I'm like, I'll do anything. But one of the things I did was I studied improvisational comedy, and I started taking classes with Kathy Kinney, who back then was not even really a blip on the map, but she was in the movie Arachnophobia, and then she became Mimi on the Drew Carey Show, and that was a big deal. So, but back before any of us were anything, we did improv. That became a huge passion, and so I taught for 25 years. So I had the acting thing going on, and when I came out here, I was all, I'm 6'5", and back in the day when I was acting, I was like 260 and tattooed. So all the nice, funny Bob, the clever Bob, was not really captured on the screen when I got roles, because I was always the heavy, always the bad guy, always a turncoat. On television, I've spent many years in prison. a lot of times a violent felon who, so my mom, when she used to say, what do you want? I'm like, well, you probably don't want this. Watch this one, Mom. And then I say, okay, she's in the retirement community, and they would watch TV. And she's like, you're so awful. You're mean. You hurt people. I'm like, that's what I'm getting paid to do. She goes, why can't you play someone nice? But I also got to do some films. My last film was Race to Witch Mountain with The Rock. And that was all good. But back when I was writing and I first got to Los Angeles, I would write something and find a friend to direct, and the director inevitably dropped out, and then I would drop back and become the director and recast my roles. And I was just writing sketch comedy and stuff, and I was pretty good at it. But that's how I sort of started directing a lot more. And I was on a soap opera in a very minor role, but for 4 years, and I was very intrigued by what they had, which was a 3-camera setup. And so on television today, I do mainly multicam shows, the occasional single camera. But like last season, I did several episodes of The Conners, the spinoff from Roseanne, and that's my passion. That's what I do today. People always ask, do you miss acting? I'm like, directing is far more interesting to me, and I somehow, by being a waiter and a camp counselor and a recovering actor, I have skills to talk to people, and that's my favorite part of the job, is talking. So that takes me to being a director. For a while, I was a director and an actor, and that just became too confusing for people to hire a known director in an acting role. And I'm like, all those big guys I was going up against, they need the work. I get to go direct. So that's how I just got into directing.
So how did you get your opportunity to write and produce and direct Plump Fiction?
I was doing improv and sketch writing, and then I went to see Pulp Fiction, and I loved it. And then I saw the sort of common themes and styles of Tarantino after watching Reservoir Dogs. And so I decided to write a movie that spoofed independent movies only. And so I saw Reservoir Dogs in the beginning of January, and by the middle of February, I had a script. And it's about it takes on 3 stories. It takes on Pulp Fiction. It takes on Reservoir Dogs. And then it takes on Natural Born Killers, which was written by Tarantino, but then directed by Oliver Stone. So I used those 3 movies as the 3 different movies. And then, there's the Forrest Gump character played by John Castaneda, who's kind of a simple guy and he's like live like a box of chocolates. And Sandra Bernhardt played the writer. And so they're trying to send the script to the set, and Forrest Gump gets hit by a car and it gets thrown up in the air, and all the pages are out of order. And that's sort of the premise of the whole movie, and I spoof other movies in it. But I decided to have it read, and what I did was sort of hard to get in Hollywood. So I staged a reading that I paid for out of my waiter's tips. I went to a place called Raleigh Studios, and I rented like a studio, so you had to drive on with a gate and stuff, so it felt kind of impressive. And then I had all my improv students, and some of them had nice clothes. And I said, so here, dress up in your nice suit or in your dress suit, and then come, and I'm going to give you cards, and you're going to pretend to be producers whom, after the reading, come up, and I'll give you my attention first. And so the reading was really well. Josh Mostel was in the reading, and the son of Zira Mostel, and a fine actor in his own right, and Kathy Kinney. This was before she was Mimi, and a bunch of people read. And it was a really, really timely, because it was happened so quick after, and really funny script. And I invited a couple of producers, and maybe 3 of them showed up, and one of them was from Rhino Pictures. And so they wanted to talk to me after the reading, which had gone so well, and I just made them wait, and I went and talked to my friends and said, just give me that card, and I took it, and they were like, who's that? And I'm like, oh, just another independent production company. How are you doing today, guys? What's going on? So I tried to create a little buzz. It worked, and Rhino Pictures, with the help of a guy named Gary Pinko, we were inking the deal right away, and when I was signing the contracts, they said, oh, wait, we need your reel. And I just finished signing. I said, I don't have a director's reel. And so I'll tell you this, when you come to the set the first day, and if I suck, you can have a new director standing right there. They can come in and direct. Just come and watch what I do. Because I was prepared, because I just know stuff. I know some filmmakers. I've been on sets as an actor. The bad directors I worked with were great teachers, teaching me what not to say to actors. And I was really prepared. So they showed up first day shooting for 2 hours, and sort of they came by occasionally, but they just let me do my thing. And so that's the story of how Plump Fiction got made. And Plump Fiction became an item in all of the rags, the entertainment rags out here in Variety and stuff, because it was a funny title. It was Rhino Pictures' first movie. And then in the middle of that, they picked up Fear and Loathing in Los Angeles with Benicio del Toro and Johnny Depp. And then my smart little, funny little movie became The Redheaded Stepchild, because that was a flashier project. Even though I had some, comedy names in mind, it was all comedians who were playing the roles. So, but I got to write a movie. I got to direct my own movie. I got to edit it, and then they changed the edit, of course. That's what they do. And then it got four-walled in theaters across the country. I basically made a movie. And it was, I just was driving past the Beverly Theater here in Los Angeles, and it turns out that occasionally it's the midnight show there. So they called it a cult movie. I'm like, okay, that's awesome. But that's how I got it made.
Tell me about the cast. I mean, because like you said, everybody is somebody, and it's really amazing to see all of this talent in one film.
Sandra Bernhard, I owe her a debt of gratitude, because she read the script. I knew of her and had been introduced to her, and she probably didn't even remember, but she read the script and she liked it, and she's playing Bunny, which is the role in the diner who picks up the gun and screams, "Oh, everyone get down, you motherfuckers," or whatever. So she signed on, and that, because of Sandra Bernhard, that gave the movie momentum. And then Dan Castellaneta plays the Forrest Gump character, and all these great comic actors. Jennifer Coolidge, who has gone on to things like, Clueless, and she's also on Two Broke Girls. She is literally a comic genius, and I wanted her to play the role of the head stripper. And they gave it to Rubens, whatever her name is. I forget her. I'm sorry, Jennifer Rubens. And Jennifer was a name somehow to the company that they thought would sell. And she was okay. She was not really in her element, because she's more of a dramatic actress. But Coolidge did me a solid and played one of the nuns, and it was a great experience. So I just, word of mouth, and also because I'm an improv comedian and performing at that time at the Improv, you just find your way. It was a really amazing experience to suddenly have people that I respected as comedians and actors come in and be in a movie. And, it is a little movie, and it's very specific to the independent world and the world of Tarantino, but it was a really fantastic experience for me.
Well, it sounds like you're really in your element working with all of these different comedians, you having taught improv and worked with improv actors for so long. It must have been pretty much a dream job to be able to do this, especially as your first big project.
Yeah, and it was low budget. And there are some constraints there. But, look, today I work as a director. My acting days are over, not because, I loved acting, but, my skill set I discovered when I directed my first episode of the Drew Carey Show. Like, it went so well. I shadowed and watched and did all the prep I could. But then in the end, you can watch all you want. You have to fucking get behind the camera and then start working. And so it went so well that they put me on the list of directors for the show on the Drew Carey Show. And Bruce Halford also is currently the Bruce and Dave Kaplan. Anyway, the three co-executive producers were on the Drew Carey Show. And so that turned out to be a really great experience. So I skipped to work, dude. I have the best job in the world. I get to direct stuff and help people make it laugh. I love doing comedy. Somehow I have this understanding of comedy that just came over the years, I guess, or also from watching television as a kid, just watching comedies all the time, that I'm living my dream, which is awesome.
Well, how did the movie change? What was that first edit versus what we see now?
It was all about budget. The lower the budget, the longer pre-production should be, so you can make sure that every dollar gets up on the screen. It was tough because I look back and watch that movie. I don't think I moved the camera very much at all. I was documenting the script and hoping that the comedy of the script was going to, win out. And it is. There are some people, it's sometimes way too inside for people to enjoy, but the people who love it get it and are in it. But I used to, when the producers were there and they say, you have to hurry up, and, I would have pretend fights with my DP, Rex, and I'd say, I have to do this. Just go behind let's walk away for a second. And then I'd finish it by going, okay? He goes, yes, sir. And I go, great. And so I took care of it. And he goes, no, it's all good. Great. Good job, Bob. And I was just saying, not take your time, but move as quickly as possible. But apparently we need to move quicker. So my being an improv actor and a recovering actor too helped me act. Some situations on a set are truly just about power or diplomacy or lack of money, or, there's also stars having a hard time. And I was blessed that no one had a hard time they were just happy to do it because there was something cool about spoofing Tarantino. It was just time and money, but it's still, it's a pretty basic movie when you look at it. But I'm really proud of it. And I also realized this, that I shot my script. I really wish I had done a punch with a bunch of my comic writer friends. It all just moved so quick because, I'm funny, I'm good, but I'm not the last word in it. And one of my favorite things about working in television is that we try it, then they rewrite it because I do multi-cameras, and they keep rewriting it. And I love that process of making it better. We were just running and gunning, so we were just getting what I got, and I think it could have used sort of a sharper script, and I think it could have used a punch. Hindsight might be 20/20, but I'm just grateful that it all happened and that I was able to complete every stage. It was shown in theaters and all this stuff. So I have a great debt of gratitude to everybody who worked on that movie with me because it was really exciting because we didn't have enough time. So great, let's go over here, we'll just sit that here and all this stuff. So.
Well, fortunately, you kept a lot of it to that one location, which I imagine helped out quite a bit.
Yes, the warehouse was really fantastic, and there were other interiors, but there was a studio down on Olympic. I wonder if it's still there. We spent most of our days there and changing that warehouse, and that gave me the appreciation for, especially when there's no money and people are, just trying to work, and then they love the project. It was nice to see people have ideas, and that's the thing I love the most. My version of anything, especially if I wrote it, I love to collaborate. And I also know how to fight for what I feel necessary. And that's another part of filmmaking that's sometimes you're just so grateful you're making a movie. You also need to step up and, strap on a pair and know what to know. I always say this to young filmmakers, ask for 5 things and be willing to give up 3 so you get the 2 you really want. So it sounds like you're collaborating with them. And then you fight really hard for the things that they're trying to take away. Then you just go, okay, fine, that's fine. Okay, I hear you, I get it. It's fine. I didn't really want them in the first place. Then they go, Bob's kind of a good guy. I'm giving out all my secrets. Bob's a good guy. He's collaborative. And I know how to play the game back a little bit. And I don't know where I got that. Maybe just because I'm from Jersey. I don't know. But that's a really important element of, especially doing an independent feature.
Well, how was the movie received when it came out?
Oh, people hated it. It got slammed. Because here's what happened too, and I'm not making excuses. I'm so grateful it got made. Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas was a much bigger and sexier project than my movie, but my movie sort of got them a little notice at Rhino Pictures, and so my movie languished for a while. If they had turned it around and released it right away, when all the, but by the time they released it, even though I wrote my movie before it was spoofed on places like Saturday Night Live, movies take time. So by the time the fall came and they released it, every SNL did spoofs on it. Everyone had done spoofs on it. So some of it was similar material. And then whether it was original, the good stuff was just still felt derivative because it'd been out there for a while. So I also think that because it was such a basic movie, relying on just sort of the script, so first of all, the camera work was not as skillful at all as Tarantino. You know what I mean? He's got this great film style and things you can always count on. There's always going to be some conversation about something like in, the Big Mac in Pulp Fiction when they're on their way to some dire situation, And like watching movies like Kill Bill and all this stuff, he's just so great. And Inglourious Bastards and The Hateful Eight. I mean, they're so good because he knows what he wants to say and how he wants to do it. I was just imitating someone who was a cool filmmaker, but didn't have the budget or time to do really interesting shots. So,
you mentioned before the whole idea of punching it up and the way that television works. And I'm curious when it comes to something like Wanda at Large or the Drew Carey Show, or I mean, you've directed hundreds and hundreds of episodes now of episodic TV. How long before, I don't want to say the cameras roll, but before things start being shot, are things locked down?
Because I love the format. It's a combination of theater and, you capture it all at once. I know how to block for cameras. So the more efficient I am at my craft, the more creative I can be within it. There's a template for all of multicam shows. Basically I always say to any new director, when you get hired by the pizzeria, make sure you deliver their kind of pizza first. Don't go in and be an auteur. Don't go in and say, I'm going to do an open calzone. No. You're going to make a fucking pizza, and you need to look at what ingredients go on it, and you need to be able to reassure them that you can deliver what they want. And then eventually, I think I did Anger Management with Charlie Sheen, which is also with Bruce Elford. And because there's a shorthand, and I know what Bruce wants, that we get to, but there's rewrites every night. Even when I work on the Connors, those scripts come in really strong. And then there's still changes because sometimes things are too long or things. There's a lot of rolling with the punches. And there's also knowing your craft. And then there's also working with stars who just, even though I feel like it works the way in the direction we're headed, and then someone turns and says, Bob, this feels uncomfortable. I go, okay, cool. Let's go again from the top. And I can change what I do because TV is a writer's medium, not a director's medium. Film is a director's medium. So we take the script, and I'm like, yeah, let's just change this, make this page more conversational. And the writer's oftentimes not there. So you just run it back and forth, and it's the same gist. Well, in TV, they've been up to 2 a.m. trying to decide whether it's boysenberry or blueberry pie. They argue about it, which is funnier. So I do not change the script. I have lots of ideas, and I'll pitch things on the fly. Like I'll go up to the room and say, hey, so we're finding a couple of things. Do you want to see the scene as written, or do you want to see what we came up with? And they said, do you think it was better? I'm like, it sounds better, but I don't know. Let me just show it to you guys. So that kind of collaboration, I still defer to writers. But with improv training, I don't get thrown. When things change, I'm like, great, let's just go and change it. But when it changes, it's important that someone's in charge, who's comfortably in charge when things suddenly change. And because I have improv training, that is a huge gift to me because I can go, great, let's do this. And people say, don't you ever get rattled? I'm like, doesn't help. It's not going to get this made any better.
So I was going to ask if you still write, and it sounds like you kind of do, but it's more like on the fly almost.
Poor Bob, it's an embarrassment of riches for me because I'm so busy to be working. And like right now I'm on a self-imposed break of 6 weeks because I want to take care of some shit in my life, like get my car to the dealership so they can service it and stuff. And when I'm working, I am so all in. I'm so excited. It's a real passion for me. I'm maybe one day when I'm older, it'll be, I'm going to work, but I don't go to work. And that's what television is so exciting. In 1 week, we create 22-minute play that we capture that changes, and people get recast, and suddenly a scene is getting cut and all this stuff. And that is when I thrive the most because I love that sudden change, and I love maintaining equilibrium as a director and calming everyone down when things are changing and getting it done. Like I say, I love my job. So I'm a very lucky man.
So once you're back off of your break where you're taking care of your car and all that stuff, I know exactly what you mean. What's next for you? The
Connors is being picked up for a second season, and I'm hoping to be doing a lot of those, and we'll see. You know, Hollywood is, you're always in the room of broken promises, and it's not a bad thing. We just have to remember that things change, you know, opinions change. So I am lucky enough that I have work on another show. I did a pilot for Netflix, and I'm back to do another episode of that. I have an offer to do a pilot, and so I am really lucky. And then I'm hoping to take some time off this summer. But here I am, like, poor Bob wants a break from his... But what tends to happen is once the fall hits, then it's really the challenge for me is to make sure I take time for myself. And that's an uptown problem to have, and I'm always aware of it, and I never take it for granted. So,
Bob, thank you so much for your time. It was a real pleasure talking with you.
It's a pleasure talking with you, too, and thank you for asking me.
Once in a great while, a film is so important that it captures the attention of the entire world.
Yo, what's up, bro?
This is not one of those films.
What's the No.
My Big Fat Independent Movie. The Hitman.
Daddy's a little confused here. Why'd you have to break down Daddy's door? Oh.
The Swinger.
We're pulling the botched robbery in Vegas, so get your guns out of that guitar case and let's hit the road!
The Not-So-Good Girl.
I'll have sex with you if you don't tell my husband.
Tell your husband what?
Do you want to have sex or not?
Together.
Why are we taking her hostage? She didn't do anything!
We're gonna forge an unlikely bond with her, idiot. They'll discover action.
Oh, now that's just wrong.
Culture.
¿Hablas español?
¿Parlez-vous français?
¿Qué?
¿Qué?
Mystery.
Have I told you about my condition? Yeah, but what are you doing? I thought you were only supposed to have one of those. I also have this memory thing.
Romance.
Lick the creases. Lick the crease. Oh, you know. Oh, hit that knob. Oh, lick my little hole.
Oh, no, you didn't.
Oh, and did we mention lesbians?
It's not sexual. It's artistic. It's artistic. It's artistic.
You know what they say. Lesbians. Better than email.
This Hanukkah.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
We're taking the highbrow world of independent film to all new lows.
Oh, no! A midget in a fantasy sequence. It's so cliched. Not to mention degrading for the midget. Dwarf. Little person. I'm sorry.
My Big Fat Independent Movie.
Oh, this is bollocks. I thought this was a Guy Ritchie film.
All right, we're back and we're talking about Plump Fiction. So surprisingly, while I was doing my research about this movie and other Pulp Fiction movies, I found that there are a ton of parody films, or parodies, I should say, of Pulp Fiction. I was very surprised to see how many porno films there are of Pulp Fiction, with like erotic fiction, which I think is kind of cheap, but Pulp Friction, I was very happy about that. Seems like there was at least one other one where I was just like, oh, I might have to check this one out. But then like it would show up, like little moments would show up in like Spy Hard and other films. I'm trying to remember some of the other ones. Like even things like, I don't know, Shanghai Noon and stuff would have little nods to Pulp Fiction. It was parodied everywhere. And of course I remember, you know, like things like The Simpsons and other cartoon shows and Mad TV, you know, everybody seemed to want to get in on it.
The thing that told me about this movie is by the time this movie came out, that whole Royale with cheese speech had been done to death, you know, and there was like nowhere else to go with it. And you could tell it just thuds in this movie because it's like the millionth time this joke is done, and then they keep hitting it. Like, you know, there's like bits of the like throughout the movie where it's like, do you want to know what's Venezuelan for cockroach? You know, it's just like this dead joke that they keep just like digging up and reviving, and you know, it just dies again.
I mean, it just shows you how impactful Pulp Fiction was to see so many parodies from cartoon TV shows to, you know, other films, but also it's, to me, the brilliance of Tarantino's writing. You know, I mean, having just seen Once Upon a Time in Hollywood now twice, and I happen to love it because it, you know, recaptures an era, but also the fact that Tarantino will allow a scene to breathe we're in a movie, which, I mean, look, Hollywood has become factory filmmaking now. It's all Marvel, Star Wars, Pixar, Disney. This is, and then you've got these other studios that aren't owned by Disney. That's pretty much where the industry's gone. And Francis Ford Coppola coined the term factory filmmaking. To see like Tarantino be able to do something like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I'm sure at some point we'll talk about it more on the show, but like those scenes where characters have conversation, just like people maybe used to do in real life. I do find it really interesting that Tarantino in interviews, when he was asked his favorite period of time to make films, to set his films in, and he answered any time before cell phone. And I do think that there's something to that when you look at modern cinema, how much how challenging it is for writers to have to write around having a cell phone solve a problem, right? I mean, our Black Mirrors that we all own, or that own us at this stage, I don't know which. I think the jury's out on how damaging social media and these devices can be. But let me just take my tinfoil hat off for a second. I find that really interesting, and just having those conversations breathe. You see that like that was the impact that like this. I mean, and look, I also made a parody that includes a Pulp Fiction thread that runs throughout. With a meaningless story that you don't really care about. It's just to see, like, try to name a filmmaker that's been as impactful in the modern age, and Tarantino is it. So here we are talking about Plump Fiction, which would have been a parody, and there's so many bad parody films that exist. Here we are talking about it because Tarantino is still relevant, and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood has made in its opening weekend more money than any Tarantino movie opener has ever.
Yeah, okay, you did do a Pulp, like a Tarantino parody, but you didn't fall into the same traps that other like parody things have done. Like you didn't do the Royale with cheese speech. I don't think you did the slow-mo walk thing. I don't think that was in there. So you avoided you avoided all of those like sort of like easy cliches with the parodies. So I'll say that. Now, if I could just say something very quickly about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, I love that movie, but I loved it probably in the same shallow way people would love a Marvel movie. And I say that because I reacted to that the way I react to a Marvel movie. So if there's like the Golden Age Human Torch, I'm like, oh. And in that, they have like they have old one sheets for Candy and Michael Sarne's Joanne. I was like, oh my God. And I actually said this in the theater. When there was a fake Mad Magazine cover where they're panning up to it, I said, holy shit, a Mad Magazine. So, and I'm like, I lost my shit when the Manson girls are singing Always Is Forever. And my appreciation for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood was very, very fucking shallow. So I have nowhere to go with that. I just wanted to say that.
It certainly did play on our love of nostalgia, which so much of this is now. I mean, Star Wars movies are, the checklist of Star Wars movies used to be checklist. There's one thing to check in the box, fun. And now it's got to be all these different things and serve some other social and political agendas, which I think are just unnecessary. It's just nice to see something that's pure, like, I'm going to go against what's out in the zeitgeist because I want to make something that transcends the period in which it was made. And that's what I appreciate about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And it's even more enjoyable upon second viewing. I'll just say that. So I'm not sure, Mike, if you intended for this to derail to talk about that film. But I think it definitely warrants discussing because Tarantino doesn't make a movie every year. His output is not consistent that way, but I'm so glad to see him at the top of his game.
Well, you mentioned money, and it's still remarkable to me that Pulp Fiction was made for roughly $8.5 million, and it brought in over $200 million. I mean, it was such a cash cow, such a hit when it came out, and this is 1994 money that we're talking about, and just how much, that's why we're talking about this parody of Pulp Fiction all of these years later, that it made such a huge impact on stuff and really helped bring about the independent film movement. I mean, yes, there were independent films before and there will be independent films after, but it really put a spotlight on this whole movement, for lack of a better term, of independent films, and then brought about, some of it was good, some of it was bad. I mean, there are some movies that came out in the wake of it that were just kind of like Tarantino knockoff, things like 11 to 45 or Truth or Consequences, New Mexico. Some of those have good things about them, not all of them. It was interesting to see what was coming out in the wake of that. But yeah, Chris, I did want to talk a little bit about My Big Fat Independent Movie, which does kind of, I would say that, it's kind of the Pulp Fiction is kind of like the backbone of the film, and then you kind of hung other things off of it. And I was very curious how you even started with that project and why you decided to do the parody of independent films at the time.
The real motivation for doing it was, I felt like at the time, and this is in like around 2003, 2004, that independent film was dead and dying. I mean, the financial models didn't make it easy for independent films to get made. Even though technologically speaking, things were changing in favor of indie film, it was just so expensive to get an indie film made and marketed. I thought, well, this genre is kind of dead. And I kind of felt like inspired by, frankly, Blazing Saddles and Mel Brooks, that when a genre is dead, that's the time to make a parody movie. It's as a way to kind of comment on the entire genre, taken as a whole. So that was the motivation behind doing it. And we had kind of strict rules, like, at the beginning it was like, okay, we don't want this to be episodic, like a series of sketches. We want it to be, what's the biggest cliche in indie film? And it's road movie, right? So let's make a road movie, and the two hitmen are going on on the road to pull a botched robbery in Vegas. I mean, it's utterly ridiculous as a concept, but then of course it's that road trip is just an opportunity for them to run into other characters that are from independent films, everything from, El Mariachi, Amelie, My Big Fat Greek Wedding, all of that. When I looked at, like, My Big Fat Greek Wedding was being praised as like this great indie movie produced by Tom Hanks's wife, right? Like, that's not really an independent film. And so this was a chance to kind of make fun of the genre and be a little bit ambitious. There's an animated title sequence, but we did have rules of like, well, this is the list of movies that we're gonna make fun of, which were the indie films that have been the most successful, or the ones that you would recognize. And then I cut together this like little sizzle reel of scenes from all those movies. It was about 10 minutes of the scenes, and everyone that got involved in the production got like this binder that had color Xeroxes of key scenes from those films, and then a VHS paper DVD that I would give out that had like the title song, sort of a demo track of the title song, and then like this montage of about 10 minutes of scenes from those key indie films, so that everyone was on the same page production-wise and just sort of tone-wise. And then I think the glue that really holds it together is Paget Brewster from the Andy Richter Show. And I mean, Paget Brewster, you can look her up on IMDb. I mean, she's done so many great comedic shows. And she was really like, I had her in mind from the beginning. She was the only person that was like cast before I even approached her, because I met her at Comic-Con, and we, I don't remember if we were on some panels together, but I know we hung out. And then it was like, I'm going to make a film with her as the lead. That was the inspiration.
Chris, didn't like Film Threat release that Agent 13, those movies she did? They were like short films. Did they release it on DVD?
Yeah, we did. We released it. We had this deal with indie filmmakers where they would come to us and we would help them market their movies. So we had a whole line of DVDs. I think we had like 30 in our library at its height. And that's kind of how I met her. And I think it was at the Comic-Con International Film Festival, which took place during San Diego Comic-Con. I helped organize that, just basically get the word out to filmmakers, create some parameters, organize the panels and whatnot. Now it's this big thing that, like, I guess I could attend it, but I don't get invited anymore. But that's all right. I'm used to that. That's kind of how I met us through that Agent 13 project. And then I don't know, I just love Paget Brewster. She really had a comedic sense, really great at improv. She cared. I remember having some problems during the movie that were actually ended up making the movie better, because she really wanted to see certain things go a certain way. There was a musical number that was going to get cut she insisted that we include it. So we brought in like a dance instructor to choreograph it, which was ridiculous. You know, look, I can't, if I looking back honestly on my Big Fat Independent movie, I would give myself maybe a C+, C- on it. On a scale, maybe a 6 or a 7, still barely fresh on Rotten Tomatoes. Because there's some things that work and then things that don't work. I think ultimately, my Big Fat Independent movie might have benefited from a 77-minute running time rather than a 90-minute running time. So I think that there are parts of it that drag, but you know, you learn these things in retrospect. And ultimately what I wanted to do with that was kind of put a nail in the coffin of independent film by making a parody movie. And then secondly, I wanted to learn how to produce a movie and go through that process myself. And I'm fortunate enough to have been on many sides of the entertainment industry, producer, screenwriter, worked at a film festival as a program director for a couple of years. So, and produced some DVDs. And then also, you know, Mike, how you and I met, Mike White and I met. Well, we met after you were supposed to appear on a TV show, IFC's Ultimate Film Fanatic. So, which I'm really sad that how that whole thing went down. But I'm glad, you know, years later here we become friends. But yeah, no, it gave me a lot of perspective and appreciation for independent film for sure. You know, I don't know. I also have not watched my Big Fat Independent movie in years. I certainly have given enough free DVDs out to friends that asked to see it, but I have not seen it in a long time, probably since it was first released on DVD. So I can't say whether or not that the movie holds up. So yeah, it just shows you that how hard it is to do a parody film that stands the test of time. I think Spaceballs stands the test of time. I think anything that Mel Brooks has done stands the test of time, honestly. And Blazing Saddles, I think, is a modern classic. Although I'm not sure how modern audiences would take that film. Many things would trigger, I think. I foresee a lot of triggers in that film.
Did you have big plans for that finale with like the enormous Mexican standoff?
I had a friend of mine, David Manos Morris, worked at ILM. And at first I came to him, I said, I've got maybe 5 or 10 special effects shots. And then it ended up ballooning to 50 special effects shots, things like replacement of billboards, things like the El Mariachi, getting hit by a car, to that, yeah. I mean, that ambitious. It was very ambitious. It was something, I came up with, like, how are we going to end this movie? It's like, here's how you do this. It was written in the script, and I kind of had to draw out the storyboard. There are certain sequences that, I feel as writer-producer of that film, I definitely crossed the line into working in a collaborative way with the director. Like, here's how we can do this with no money. And I think that when you're doing things on an independent scale, you have to be creative, because money is the last thing that will solve a problem for you. Yeah, it was just like, okay, let's just do it as like a thing from above. Like, it's just a map, and it's just like a simple thing, like a fuse going off. It was like a fuse. That's how that was achieved.
I have to say, it's funny that you came to Paget Brewster through her comedy. I mostly know her from her serious work when she was in Criminal Minds, and she was deadly serious. And then when I started to see her show up on Drunk History, I was like, oh my God, she can play comedy as well. And then when I was rewatching my Big Fat Independent movie over the weekend, I was like, oh yeah, I forgot she plays. Not only is she the Jennifer Aniston character, but she kind of flips into other movies as well. So that was kind of nice to see her move throughout a bunch of movies and kind of always come back to that good girl character.
Yeah.
Yeah, Bjork's pretty good.
Yes, the Bjork is amazing.
I love her on Drunk History too. She's just, having been to her house for a couple of parties, she is someone who has impeccable taste. And she's a great conversationalist on many topics. So seeing her turn up in Drunk History is great. She's, I've always thought of her as being underutilized in almost anything that she's been in. But yeah, I'm not as familiar with her serious work. I guess I'm just not a procedural guy. Those procedural TV shows, to me, they just sort of leave me like, it's all going to end up the same. But yeah, like, that's funny. We see her career differently.
I did appreciate that you kind of had a wider scatter when it comes to the number of movies that you were looking at and taking aim at in My Big Fat Independent Movie, because there were a lot of them where I was just like, okay, I think I know what this is. And then it would take a few seconds for it to really kind of register. Like for a second there, you have a character who's parroting Sex Lies and Videotapes. I think the character's name is Spader. And I was thinking that you're going for Wes Bentley in American Beauty. And I was like, oh, wait, no, he's asking your personal questions about having sex and her face when she orgasms. I was like, okay, now I get it. I was waiting for him to turn around and there'd be like a plastic bag floating someplace.
Yeah, we did our best to try to work in as much of these as possible. But I think the thing that helped us was really having that prep with the binder, of all these exact, down to like trying to parody the lighting and the color, I'm not saying whether or not we succeeded or it was great, but the really good parody stuff I think is on when the MTV Movie Awards used to be good. When MTV used to be good, remember a long time ago? The MTV, now it's just garbage reality shows, but at the MTV Movie Awards, there was effort that was put in to do these perfect parodies. That's expensive, down to getting the right props, to matching the lighting and the color correction, to so many things now that, I'm sure they're less expensive to do today, but boy, I think there was no one better at doing those parodies than the MTV Movie Awards. And the two writers that I collaborated with had worked as writers on the MTV Movie Awards, and I found them at a film festival. They did a short parody film, and then we partnered up to work on the script. I would say that one of the sequences I am most proud of is that montage where Pauly Shore gets obliterated and he's just like killed. And I don't think he knew exactly what we were going to do, but I met him at a film festival because he made an indie movie and he was a nice enough guy. That's how I got Bob Odenkirk to actually be in the film as well. Like, we're all just going to film festivals and then kind of cashing in whatever favors, like, hey, would you mind being in my movie for scale? And so that's how Pauly Shore was in the movie. And then Bob Odenkirk, we literally shot him in 30 minutes. But the idea was he's in the trunk of the two hitmen where he's dying like Tim Roth's character from Reservoir Dogs, but he actually pays rent and lives in the trunk. So he's technically in the whole movie as a disembodied voice. But and there's a couple scenes every time they open Bob Odenkirk in the trunk, in that bleeding outfit, but positioned like Tim Roth's character in Reservoir Dogs. So that was fun. It was done in 30 minutes. He came to the home of the two producers. He was on a flight, so he had a hard out. He did the scene, and I remember, I think there's on the DVD of My Big Fat Independent Movie, I'm actually really proud of, because there's so many extras and Easter eggs on it. Literally, if you move the cursor through every menu screen, you will find like something hidden. But we have all these like outtakes of him, and the one thing he kept doing was great was the director Phil Zlotarinsky would slam the trunk. He'd slam it harder, like just go for it. Don't every scene just like go, come on. And then he had to take. He was covered in, of course, that Caro syrup blood concoction. So he had to take a shower, and then he got a shower, shook hands, and took off and was on his way. He was on a flight, but he did it in 30 minutes. Got paid scale and was a perfect gentleman and a joy to work with. He was awesome. But one of my favorite Easter eggs, which I'm not sure if anyone has found, because I've never gotten anything about this, but there's like, I put my personal email address like on the DVD. There's like all these like little Easter eggs, but the one Easter egg I'm really proud of is it's all the outtakes from the scene where the character from Memento is getting ass fucked. We did the outtakes. It's a long outtake of all of that, like minutes and minutes of footage of him getting fucked in the ass by this dude. And it's all it is. There's a title screen that comes up and it says typical independent film distribution deal. And then it's like 10 minutes of this guy getting fucked in the ass. So that's one of the Easter eggs that's on the double disc edition that Anchor Bay really just let me go crazy with in terms of extras. So I was really proud of that. What I was trying to do with the DVD was actually do a parody of special edition DVDs that have a ton of special features. One of actually the special features is behind the scenes. All it is like a security cam shot of a guy editing the behind the scenes. And it's like, you see, it's like day 1, day 2. He barely moves. He's just editing the behind the scenes. You see like 10 seconds, 20 seconds, then it fades. Day 2, same thing. Day 3. Then you see him smell his armpit, right? And then day 4 comes up and he's wearing a different shirt. I mean, it's like a 1 minute behind the scenes, but I was trying to mock, the ridiculousness. I think that some special edition DVDs go to parody or to include special features.
I'm glad that you're using the term Easter egg in the correct way, because nowadays it's just like reference means Easter egg. And I'm just like, what are you talking about? That's just a reference. That's not an Easter egg. Like, you have to hunt for an Easter egg. Please, come on.
I really liked the Bob Odenkirk scene, and I didn't take it as a direct parody of Reservoir Dogs. I took it more as like a parody of all the Tarantino ripoffs, because it seems like in all the ripoffs there's a guy in a trunk somewhere. There's a guy in a trunk bleeding to death. Yeah, and of course I love Bob Odenkirk, so I love the of Bob Odenkirk in that.
Well, there's on the DVD there's plenty of that. There's a whole sequence of that, and then try to include what would I want on this thing. So I think I would actually rank the DVD maybe a little higher than the movie itself. And there are movies like that. I mean, almost every Trauma movie, if the commentary track includes Lloyd Kaufman, just makes it all that much better, because having interviewed and spoken to Lloyd in the past, and I'm sure Mike, you have as well. I mean, he's such a real life indie film legend and hero of mine. So, I just love Uncle Lloyd. So sometimes there are having reviewed DVDs for years. I mean, not that DVDs are a thing anymore. I mean, it's that sort of spiraled into, even I buy things just digital, right? You just buy it digital. You're going to get all the extras. Now that the extras are on digital, that's what converted me finally. There are some movies that come along where you're like, oh, well, God, the DVD extras are better than movies. When Bruce Campbell would ever do commentary or behind the scenes, or getting a glimpse into how a certain filmmaker works. I'm not sure what the data says about people actually watching the extras, but I watch all those extras. I'm sure you guys do as well.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. There are a lot of movies where I'm just like, okay, yeah, I've got the movie file, or I can, get the real cheap disc, but I really want this commentary. So thank goodness for stuff like DVD Beaver, because Amazon sucks when it comes to actually saying what's on a disc. It's like, especially when there's something where it's like, oh, there are about 15 different versions of this movie, and good luck finding the one with the extras or the most extras. And I'm looking at comparison charts on DVD Beaver and going okay, well, I can live without that, but I really want this one. And okay, yeah, it looks like I have to buy the Region 3 French disc from Zimbabwe or something. So it's like, okay, now I know where I can get this. And then, yeah, good luck trying to find it.
Well, if you have an all-region DVD player, that sure comes in handy.
And then if you can actually order stuff from overseas, that's even better. All right, guys, we're going to take another break and play a preview for next week's show.
How'd you hurt your arm?
I fell.
Me too. I'll tell you a story. Close your eyes. There were 5 of them. The Indian, the ex-slave, an explosive expert, Charles Darwin, and the masked bandit. They had one common enemy, Governor Odious.
Is Odious a bad man?
Oh, yeah. But first, I need a favor.
Always stop at the same part when it's very beautiful.
Do you want me to finish the story? Be a good bandit. When I fall asleep, you gotta go.
Why?
I don't want you to see me like this. It's poisonous.
That story was just a trick to get you to do something for me.
Wake up. Why are you making everybody die?
We're a strange pair, aren't we?
Are you trying to save my soul?
That's right, we'll be back next week with a discussion of Tarsum's The Fall. Until then, I want to thank this week's co-hosts, Chris and Mike. So, Mike, how is the cutthroat world of professional mascotting?
Well, I actually met John O'Hurley a few weeks ago. That Mr.
I saw that picture.
Mr. Peterman from Seinfeld, and I went to fist bump him, and he just sort of bumped his elbow against my elbow, and he just kind of sighed. He was not having. He was bored, but otherwise, it's been very hot and chafe-inducing and just, rash-inducing and just it's very uncomfortable this summer. Mascotting for both a minor league baseball team and a minor league hockey team.
Are you doing much writing these days?
I'm working on a thing for CinemaSoar right now, and I'm not sure if that's going to see print, but I am in the latest issue of CinemaSoar. Let me see, it's in 32. I reviewed the Dick Van Patten instructional video, Dirty Tennis. I'm also in the latest issue of Shock Cinema. It's issue 56. I interviewed Sandy Martin from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, and I did, some reviews of movies. And soon enough, Hobbs and Shaw will be on the Shock Cinema blog. So that's something special for all the fans of the projection booth that I know love my writing. So be on the lookout for that.
And Chris, how is Michigan's favorite nerd, Leopardy, doing?
How am I doing? The Film Threat website, we just relaunched a new design for the site and we were able to restore, more than 36,000 stories from our archives dating all the way back to the mid-90s, which is really exciting. So check out filmthreat.com. And then, of course, we have the Film Threat podcast sometimes twice a week. We just got back from San Diego Comic-Con, so we have an episode from Comic-Con. And then I'm with mostly filmmaker interviews. And then the next episode will be a review of, something that we consider worthy of conversation. But we've had some really good guests, a lot of documentary filmmakers, and we had John C. Reilly on the podcast, among others, if you go into our archives. And then working on a couple documentary films, including there's a documentary being made about Film Threat, tentatively titled Film Threat Sucks. I'm sort of the facilitator of that project, so that'll be out in a couple years. And I guess I can announce there's going to be a book that's going to be coming out sometime in 2020 or early 2021 called The Worst of Film Threat. And it's a coffee table book, basically, of best articles from the old issues of the magazine, including a lot of unpublished material, sort of a whole story of the history of Film Threat. And then it's not going to be a cheap book, but you will get a digital code to download every issue of Film Threat ever published. We've been working on this project for some time. So look for that book in the near future.
Will it be the Slate Boy strips in that?
Oh, yeah. Slate Boy strips, unpublished art. It's really, we're basically taking the best of what's in the Film Threat archives, unseen things, kind of giving a glimpse into old photos, back in the 90s and 80s of when the print, it's really the history of the print magazine from 1985 to 1997. A lot of things that didn't make it. There were 2 completely unpublished issues for various reasons, and we just found one of those issues, which is really exciting. So Robert St. Mary from Detroit, who I think Mike, is actually going to be the editor of this book. So, and there'll be some, we're going to get some other interesting people involved in it. It's one of those things that's been a labor of love for a couple of years. So I can't wait for this book to come out. It's just definitely capturing a moment in time when we still fed our movie addiction with, print, through magazines. I mean, I was pretty much a magazine junkie at the time, and now it's all online. So it's really interesting to me to see how spoiled everyone is today. Within 2 clicks, I find this movie, Plump Fiction. It's like, oh, it's on YouTube. I'm just going to watch it, right? I don't even need to buy it. But I remember back in the day, and I'm sure Mike White, you remember this too. I would send off for a self-addressed stamped envelope to a guy in Florida who would send me inscrutably small type on these badly Xerox pages. And it would be $20 for a VHS bootleg of a movie if you couldn't find it legally, right? But then they'd have some deal that was like 3 for $40. So you'd always spend $40. And I was constantly writing money orders to, weird dudes who were selling lists of movies, and you'd wait 4 to 6 weeks for delivery. I mean, it was just like, it's just being a movie fan was like being in the 80s and 90s was like being Indiana Jones, right?
Yeah.
It was art house theaters or driving to another state to see a film because there was some John Waters retrospective and maybe Glenn Milstead would be there or someone from the film. I mean, I just remember how hard it was to be a film fan in the 80s and 90s, where it was going to the DIA, going to the Maple Theater, which was an art house theater, and nowadays it's just click, saw it, hate it, boom. I mean, a big movie comes out on Thursday night. Everybody's seen it for bragging rights. On the whole Twitterati has decided what they think of this movie. And then by Monday, it's who cares about Star Wars or whatever, or Marvel movies are over or whatever it is. It's just incredible to me, the bizarre sort of lack of appreciation and entitlement from the audience is just mind-boggling when guys like you and I struggled just to see these things. So there you go. There's my old, also, by the way, get off my lawn.
Well, thank you so much, guys, for being on the show. Thanks to everybody for listening. Please head on over to the website, projectionboothpodcast.com, where you can find out more about today's episode. You'll also find a link over to Patreon, where you can make a donation. Yes, I am begging you for your hard-earned money. Every donation we get helps the Projection Booth take over the world.
If you enjoy this show and want more people to know about it, head on over to iTunes, leave a comment, and rate it 5 stars. Make sure you like and share us on Facebook, and don't forget to follow us on Twitter. Just search for Christopher Media. Thank you in advance for supporting Christopher Media by clicking on the PayPal button and by clicking through to all the sponsors who support ChristopherMedia.net. Most importantly, we would like to take the time to extend an extra special thanks to you. Christopher Media could not exist without your support. Thank you for visiting ChristopherMedia.net, and thank you for listening. Christopher Media. Let's make some noise.